Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden, picking up where we left off. Method 2. Although according to this method you may choose any object whatever, say a little statue, a doll or such like, as a suitable form for your elementary, I shall in addition make you acquainted with a very ideal secret practice. Let's remove my hood because maybe that'll affect the microphone. Take 2/3 of loam and 1/3 part of wax, the parts to be understood in volumetric and not in weight sense, which means, for instance, that for 1 litre of the mass you have to take, I assume that means 2/3 of one of loam, 2/3 of the whole, and 1/3 of the whole of wax, to get the correct proportion. Stir the loam with some warm water to a thick pulp and add the beeswax, whether completely melted or very softly warmed up. Knead both ingredients to one mass until the loam is very well mixed with the wax. Do not take too much water to prepare the loam, otherwise the mass will turn out too soft and it would be difficult to operate with it. If genuine beeswax be not available, any other suety ingredient will do, such as tallow, stearine, spermaceti and the like, which are generally used for making candles. This would be a last resource, of course, because genuine beeswax will be much better. Now, from the thoroughly kneaded mass, form a figure giving it the shape you want the elementary to have. If you want to give the shape of a human being to the elementary, the mass also ought to be moulded on this shape. With a rather big nail or any pointed object, sink a wide opening while the doll is still warm and soft. Begin with the head, move down, as it were, along the spinal marrow to the feet, thus producing a large hollow inside the wax figure. Now fill this hollow space up to the opening with a fluid condenser, and stop the opening while the figure is still soft to prevent the condenser from leaking out. Another way is to pour the condenser into the figure after it has cooled down and hardened, stopping the opening with liquid wax or with a candle. As to the treatment of magic condensers, I shall enlarge on this subject in a special chapter. If the magician intends to create the elementary for his own purposes only, he has to stop the opening of the figure with a cotton wool plug containing a few drops of his own, i.e. organic prima material. This is the alpha and omega, therefore take a few drops of the own blood or sperm. In our case, one thing or the other would obviously be sufficient, but if both mummiae of the first class were connected, it would be still more effective. Supposing a female magician is concerned, a drop of her own blood does, of course, serve the same purpose. The cotton wool plug prepared in this manner has to be put first into the hollow of the figure, pouring the fluid condenser over it. Only then, not before, finally stop the opening. A figure like this, according to the magic rules, is the most ideal form to create an elementary. The size of the figure does not matter at all, although it is evident that the bigger the doll's shape is, the more fertile will be your creative imagination. Put a figure of approximately 4 inches, in brackets 10 centimeters, will do for a skilled, but a figure of approximately 4 inches, 10 centimeters, will do for a skilled magician. In case an elementary has to be created and a doll to be shaped for another person, the own prima materia is not to be mixed with the fluid condenser, otherwise serious damage will be done to the magician. The respective person, in consequence of the mental, astral and material connection, would obtain the opportunity to influence the magician directly or indirectly to good as well as to bad effects. A figure, for example, prepared with the mumia and put into cold water will cause shivering fits in the magician's own body who created it, and the other way round. If the doll were exposed to great heat, a high fever would be the result. A great number of other possibilities are still granted by the magic sympathetic band. but I will omit to quote them not to seduce the scholar to any bad doings. The aforementioned doll can, of course, be loaded with one single element only, and an elementary can be created in the way described in the previous method, but I am going to particularize practice of the second method as well. Take your wax figure in the left hand and rub it gently with your right hand, as if you wanted to animate it with your vital power. Blow your own breath on it, as if you wanted to resuscitate the lifeless figure. Give your developing elementary the name you have destined to it, and speak this name several times into the figure. Religiously inclined magicians do even baptize the figure in a way similar to the christening of a newborn child, and give the name to the figure while performing this ceremony. This, of course, is a matter of opinion and any magician, and not absolutely necessary. At all events, ascertain yourself at this experiment that in this figure you possess a perfect body appropriate to your elementary. After your doll has got its name, fill your whole body with the help of the element breathing with the earth element. Do project it, whether through one of your hands or through the solar plexus outwards, and fill the figure with this element beginning from the feet up to the neighbourhood of the genitals. The earth element has to be accumulated dynamically in these parts when filling the figure. Now concentrate all the specific properties of the earth, such as gravity and the like, into it. And while you are doing so, you must have the firm will and conviction that the earth element with all its qualities will remain in the figure and work there constantly. Proceed in the same manner with the water element, which you are projecting into the doll's abdominal region. After that, transfer the air element to the chest region and the fire element into the head. As soon as you have projected all the four elements into the figure with the help of imagination, you may be sure to have created the astral body of your elementary, which has adopted the doll's shape, but in conformity with your desire, could also emanate from the doll whenever you like to, except in the size you prefer. The astral body of your elementary will always remain connected by an invisible bond to the material frame, in our case the doll, and the life as well as the existence of the elementary depend on the physical doll and are bound to reassume the size of the doll. After the task is accomplished, re-entering and reuniting into the doll's shape immediately. Up to this stage, you may repeat the experiment several times and reinforce its efficiency by deep meditation on the act of proceeding. Provided you have produced the astral body of your elementary in the manner described here, you may turn to form the mental body of the elementary as follows. With the help of your imagination, produce in the doll the mental body, which you think is made from the finest etherical matter, and see how it is surrounding and wrapping in the entire form of the doll. Concentrate into the head of the doll all the properties of the soul and the mind which you want your elementary to own, and deepen these qualities by meditation. Provided you are not interested in any special desires, you may concentrate on the four specific properties of the mind: will, intellect, feeling, and consciousness, and deepen them by meditating on them. If you are sure that the figure has been sufficiently loaded and enabled to produce the intended effect, let us deal with the awakening of life of your elementary. Accumulate in your right hand such an amount of light from the universe that the hand is shining like a sun, that means fiery white, red hot. Take the figure in your left hand and hold your radiant right hand some inches above it. Exhale your warm breath to the doll's navel region and speak the name of your elementary aloud into it. When doing so, imagine that the light of your right hand is growing less and fading away from your right hand with each breath, entering into the puppet. Right at the first blowing your breath to it, imagine that the doll's heart is beginning to beat and the blood to circulate. Your imagination must be so intense that you can feel the life in the puppet quite distinctively, as it were, physically. At the seventh exhaling, the light in your right hand will have completely disappeared, having passed into the doll. The astral form of your doll is throbbing and alive. At the eighth breathing to it, think that the astral body of your figure is accepting your breath and beginning to breathe regularly. At the ninth blowing your breath into it, call your elementary by its name, and at the same time shout aloud and ecstatically, "Live, do live, be alive." The last, "be alive," must be exclaimed enthusiastically and convincingly, in the unshakable faith that the desired elementary has been created, but positively sure that, according to the analogous law of nature, a perfect being has actually been brought into the world. Arrived at this point, one can either go on or wrap the figure in a piece of genuine silk for further use. Silk is known to be the best magic insulating material. The figure is to be kept in a favourable spot, inaccessible to anybody else. No foreigner must ever come in touch with the figure. Any further work is already a matter of imagination. Provided you wish the advance, put the figure again in front of you. Imagine the astral body together with the mental body emanating from the puppet. You have to imagine your elementary very much alike a tiny, complete human being, in a way as if you were looking at a normal human being through a minimizing glass. It is also entirely up to you to see in your elementary a male or female being, this depending on the kind of the task it is expected to fulfill. The same is true for the clothing of it. Your fantasy may decide by the whim or pleasure of the moment. According to the task ahead, you may link the elementary by imagination to a self-selected ritual. Allow it swiftly to grow as big as you want it to be. Impress on your elementary, right from the beginning, the command that it should adopt the size you decided for it. This will give you the chance to have your elementary shrunk to a dwarf or grown a giant. It depends absolutely on your will and your liking, whether you want to give your elementary an attractive or a less beautiful form. The purpose, too, on which you decide also plays a part here, as every astral and mental body is independent of time and space, matter being no obstacle for it. It is necessary for you to communicate this property to your elementary right from the beginning by imagination. It is therefore advisable for every magician to link important occurrences when operating with an elementary to a self-chosen ritual, because this occurrence wished for will become a routine matter, so that he is dispensed from using his volition or imagination, the ritual connected to the respective occurrence producing the necessary power and effect. When working with the elementary for a longer period, the elementary may be automatically or in conformity with a desire condensed to such an extent that it becomes visible even to an untrained physical eye. It is, however, better to make the elementary work in an invisible manner, which of course has to be preset by an imaginary agreement with the elementary. At the beginning, such a created elementary will fulfill first mental, later on astral, and after longer use, even material tasks. All depends on the purpose to which the magician has created it. The purpose, that is the task, must be incorporated into the elementary in the very moment of its creation. Afterwards, it would be more difficult to impress new qualities on it. Hence, before creating an elementary, one ought to form a written plan of action in which everything is carefully considered before starting the proper creation. Never permit an elementary to outmaneuver you, though it may have developed to such a degree as to set free grand mental, astral, or even physical effects. always confine the elementary after having done its duty to its own body, say the wax figure, with the aid of your pre-established ritual, never allowing it to pursue its own will. Be always aware of your own authority and magic power, and make always sure that life and death of the elementary are in your hands in the form of the wax figure presenting the body of the elementary. Representing the body of the elementary. The destruction of this figure, or the flowing away of the fluid condenser, will cause the elementary's death or its decomposition. As the wax figure must always be wrapped in genuine silk, one may be certain that the astral body will neither enter the figure nor slip out of it, because the silk will stop it. To know and to remember this is most important. If you separate the elementary from its body, sending it off somewhere or ordering it to produce any effects, the figure must be free, that is, unwrapped. If by any chance you have wrapped the figure in silk when the astral body happens to be outside of it, you might be killing the elementary, eventually dissolving it instantly, in the same way as if you were touching a magician whose astral body is outside his physical body, killing him at the same moment, because the linking thread between the astral body and the mortal frame has been torn by the touch. As you see, you will have to treat a created elementary in exactly the same way as if you were dealing with any human being. The dissolution of an elementary must not take place suddenly, because the power set free has its origin in the magician himself, and the sudden drawback could eventually cause severe damages to the magician, especially if this elementary is already capable to produce strong physical effects which even the magician himself would not be able to accomplish. In such a case, the disintegration has to be performed gradually. Therefore, be on your guard beforehand against the elementary growing to such an extent as to outdo the magician's physical, astral, and mental powers. Hence, I recommend the following two methods to disintegrate an elementary. As mentioned previously, the destruction must not happen all of a sudden, for example, by burning the figure without unloading it, etc. One should always consider that, according to the method described here, it's a part of the own self, of the own ego that has been projected into the elementary, and that any abrupt destruction would result in a strong magical drawback. Should not the magician be sufficiently resistant or otherwise protected against such drawbacks, he would certainly suffer severe damages of his health, such as dysfunctions of the heart, nervous breakdown, paralysis of different kinds, mental defects, and so forth. Therefore, carefulness is always advised where magic is concerned, and one must strictly observe the directions and instructions given here. Then you will never incur any danger with respect to your health or otherwise. Only a fool ignoring or disobeying the rules will injure himself or other people. A sensible, righteous person will do good deeds only for the benefit of mankind, thus achieving high grades in magic, because he will never affront the laws of nature and spirit. The process of decomposition is, in the case of an elementary, exactly the same as in the passing away of man, unless the dissolving method was fixed at the very moment of creation, thereby deciding on another process. Take the figure in your hand and imagine the usual breathing process of the astral body in it. You feel the beating of the heart and the throbbing of the blood. Now load your right hand, which you are imagining to be of a black-violet colour, with akasha. Do project akasha pointedly to the heart of the figure, all of a sudden like a streak of lightning. By doing so, you have killed your elementary. The heart stands still, the breathing has ceased. Withdraw the mental body from the figure, because through the streak of the akasha, the bond between the mental and the astral body has been torn. As soon as you did imagine the mental body being outside the puppet, dissolve it with the help of your imagination into the universal light, alike to steam evaporating. After that, pass to the decomposition of the astral body in the puppet by having one element after the other evaporated imaginarily into the universal element. Begin doing so with the fire element in the head of the figure. Then follows the air element in the neighbourhood of the chest, the water element in the abdomen, and finally the earth element in the feet. Now somehow open the hollow of the puppet, and to make short work of doing, break its head off. Catch the contents, that means the fluid condenser, with a piece of blotting paper, which you have to burn then. The puppet itself could be used again to make a new elementary, when needed and newly modelled, but it is more advisable to destroy it by burning or burying it in a lonely spot. This would be the normal way of decomposition. Apart from that, I am going to describe another method which is generally used when an elementary had been condensed to such a degree that it did accomplish physical tasks or else had become so strong that it refused to obey the magician's power, having got beyond his control. To protect yourself against any magic reaction or the cunning of the elementary, keep exactly within the following directions. Prepare a hot tub bath, as hot as your body can endure it. Go into the bathtub and sit down. Hold in your left hand the figure wrapped in silk. The right hand is loaded with akasha. Now shake off the silk wrapping with your left hand. That is the one you are holding the figure in. The very moment you are holding the naked figure immediately above the water, direct the destructive beam of akasha to the heart of the figure. At the same time, dip the doll below the water, and while doing so, think that all the power, all abilities, the whole life is passing with the help of the water into your own body, your soul, and your spirit. This process represents a very abrupt destruction of the created being, i.e. your elementary. Your body, soul, and spirit are your body, soul, and spirit are accepting the life in a tolerable manner. The rest of the power remains in the water, and you are protected against any magic drawback or reaction. Now leave the bath, dry yourself, leaving however the puppet still in the water until it has cooled down. The silk in which the puppet had been wrapped might also have glided into the water. Let the cold water flow off into the drain or empty it, but make sure that nobody else comes in touch with this water. If your eyes are already clairvoyant, and if you notice that the figure is still emanating an aura, throw it once more into the hot water and concentrate on the water, taking away the last bit of life. The doll will dissolve and melt in the hot water, and the fluid condenser, i.e. the liquid, will mix up with the hot water. You may perform this experiment in any case, even if you don't see the emanation. At least you will thus be sure that all life in the elementary is extinct. Burn or bury the remains of the doll together with the silk. With this last operation, the elementary is dead and gone for you. Before I am going to terminate this chapter, I would like to give a few hints to the magician who has to work with elementaries. These hints are of a paramount importance for the practitioner. Exactly as the hours of birth and death of man are already predestined by fate, decide on the duration of life of your elementary in the same way at the very creation act. That means fix the exact dying hour, which you have got to keep to the very minute, even if you have determined your elementary to live for years. It is therefore recommended to write down everything beforehand, not to forget anything at all. If your elementaries have been created and condensed to such a degree as to be able to talk like human beings, they will try to beseech or even threaten you not to destroy them. On no account descend to promises of any kind, nor do yield to bluffs or threats. Sooner or later, you would lose the control of the elementaries, and that would be disastrous for you indeed. Even though the elementaries had served you faithfully and you had become quite fond of them, it must be all the same to you to destroy them, indifferent and in cold blood, as soon as their hour of death has struck. Start the act of decomposition without any pity, just as if you were performing any kind of magic operation. How very important it is to fix the exact hour of death of an elementary, you may argue, from the fact that in case anything should happen to you and you should die before the elementary's hour is come, this latter would dissolve itself at the moment fixed by you. However, though departed, you might perform your destroying work in the Akasha sphere too, if you were as yet interested in it. I am not going to describe here how anything like that could be managed, because it would be out of the scope of this book. Being, however, on the astral level, you would, as a perfect magician, understand that automatically. If in such a case the lifetime of an elementary were not limited to terms, that means, had not the hour of death been exactly fixed, the elementary would go on existing for hundreds of years after the producer's death and constantly be viable. In the meantime, it would probably grow into a spook, a hobgoblin, a vampire, and, in Akasha, its creator. i.e., the magician would be responsible for all the actions produced by the elementary. Now, the question will probably arise, how many of such or similar elementaries may be created by a magician? This problem is entirely left to him. He should decide, however, he should decide how many he needs for his own purposes and how many he wants to create for other people. Some magicians have a throng of elementaries as their servants, fulfilling faithfully all the tasks they are ordered to do. Thus, for example, the magician might have elementaries pointing out every danger to him in advance. Others again will protect him or forward messages to him, etc. There is no use to quote all the possibilities, because all of them are individual and depend on the desires which the magician wants to be realized with the help of the elementaries. The speaking pictures, columns and statues in the temples of the ancients may certainly be interpreted as an outgrowth of elementaries' magic. The legend concerning the golem, who is said to have been created by the wise Rabbi Lowe in Prague, goes likewise back to the creation of elementaries. But in the case of the golem, the creation has been produced with the rites of the Kabbalah. Anybody who knows of Kabbalistic mysticism is informed about these facts. The synthesis remains the same as quoted in this method. And we'll pick up there later.